Hi, I'm Bill Kristol. Welcome back to Conversations. I'm very pleased to be joined again today by Garry Kasparov, with whom we've had several, I think, very interesting, and many people think very interesting conversations about topics ranging from his own history as a chess champion and his leading a democracy movement in Russia, his leaving Russia, unfortunately, having to leave Russia, and then his work on artificial intelligence as well. And Garry now runs two pro-democracy, pro-human rights organizations, the Renew Democracy Initiative and the Human Rights Foundation. Spends most of his time fighting for democracy, not just in Russia, but around the world and against the authoritarian wave. So, Garry, thanks for joining me again.
Oh, thanks for inviting me.
So let's talk about Russia and then more broadly about authoritarianism and how to fight the authoritarian wave and promote democracy. But Russia, you wrote a book, Winter is Coming, in 2015, I think, and we've discussed that. And so, I mean, here we are 6 years later. It's not better, right?
No, it's not better, but as expected. So, we probably should, spend a bit of time, describing what better means for Russian terms. Putin is 6 years older, so his biological time is ticking, hopefully. But we know that dictators are, they could stay just for a long time. So unfortunately, they're aging well. And at the same time, I think it's any illusions people had about Putin's regime, they've gone. So in 2015, when the book was released, in 2016, I had a huge problem, and actually we discussed it in our conversation, to communicate the story about the true nature of Putin's regime.
Yeah.
Just to say Putin was a dictator, could spark an outburst of your counterparts. Say no. It's just a kind of managed democracy. Yes, it's not perfect democracy, but look at the Soviet Union. It's still better. Are you sure now? No, I think it's actually much worse, because in the Soviet Union, there was some sort of a clarity. It's more like a chess game, black and white. Right now, Putin succeeded. Let's give him credit for muddying the water. And now, even in America, you have a lot of people that are just no longer sure that democracy is better than authoritarianism, and market economy is better than socialism. So it's unfortunate. It's an outcome of the many years of this passive response, or even just total rejection of the real threat coming from Putin. I've been warning that Putin was a threat not only for Russians, not only for neighboring countries, not only for Europeans, but for the free world and for the United States, because Putin's algorithm of staying in power is launching hybrid war on the free world. He knows that at this time, that's the era of globalization and the widespread of modern technology. He cannot hide behind an iron curtain. That's not going to work. People still have information. They have so many channels to understand how things are working in the United States, in Europe, or elsewhere. But what about using the kind of judo tactics? And he was a judo semi-professional, to use opponents' strengths against them, and he did succeed, because they found a way of using modern technology, free press, and all other important ingredients of free society to discredit the very idea of democracy and to spread doubts around the world. I always call Putin a merchant of doubt, and he's quite good in selling these doubts.
That's interesting.
But but today we probably reached a point where very few people, except those who are on Putin's payroll, and unfortunately the list is quite long for us to recite. Mostly they're in Europe, not in America, but even in America we have definitely few people that are just looking favorably to Putin due to their financial interest. But otherwise, the Putin's latest actions, they prove that this regime is no longer playing old-fashioned games. They're no longer even pretending that it's the Russia has any sort of democratic system or rule of law. It's my way or highway. And the latest stories with Navalny poisoning and his arrest and his continuous contempt for the treaties Russia signed, for international organizations where Russia is a part of, should be unequivocal message for those who still are looking for excuses. But that's you may call it good side of the story. The bad side of the story, that even with all these cards being opened, with no more secrets, no more mimicking Russia as a democratic state, the realpolitik is still very much the factor for many European politicians, and we hear this continuous calls of dialogue as the only alternative. There's no other alternative but dialogue, and I don't know what kind of dialogue Macron or other European leaders want to have with Putin. And again, the good news is that now in America we have an administration that had no illusions about Putin, as Obama administration had, though Biden and many of his many of his team members today were also part of Obama's administration, but they had no illusions about Russia. And also we don't have Trump anymore, so that we had two administrations, that one was absolutely feckless in its foreign policy and another one was reckless. And now we have an administration that I hope will be realistic, and realistic means it will take a strong stand against Putin and against all the negative effects that those the results of American negligence towards Putin and spread of authoritarianism around the world.
Yeah, so let's come back to that, because that's very important, I think. And I think you've always been very much one who pointed out the effects, direct and indirect, of Putin and Putinism elsewhere, that it wasn't just this isolated. It's unfortunate that Russia has this guy, but what can we do about it? But that it really would have an effect much more broadly. But let's come back to Russia, because you fought him there. You left in 2013. You had to leave. Boris Nemtsov, I think you and you recently wrote an article where you and he had testified together, I think, before Senator McCain and in the Senate, and then he went back and was killed 2 years later. But it does feel, or maybe not, the Navalny, the demonstrations, and I think you emphasized Navalny's exposure of Putin's wealth and corruption, maybe has changed the dynamics internally a little bit from where it was 7 or 5 years ago?
Yes, but it's not just Navalny's case that changed the dynamics. Dynamics had been changing steadily, and Navalny is a catalyst. Naturally, his heroic decision to come back after nearly being killed by the KGB death squad that, as we know now, had been using this the nerves agents to poison the enemies of the regime, the opponents of the regime. So Navalny's decision to come back, understanding that he would face serious consequences. I'm not sure whether it's grave consequences yet, but very few have doubts that Navalny will not see the day of light outside of his prison cell as long as Putin is in power. So that was a catalyst. He came back. He made this big personal sacrifice. Then at the same time, they released a movie about Putin's corruption, about Putin's palace. And of course, it was an open challenge to a dictator. And dictators had no choice. They have to accept the challenge. And Russia had the most brutal response to peaceful demonstrations across the country. It was massive. We never seen massive demonstrations of that magnitude, I would say probably since early 90s. Yeah, it's 1991. That was still Soviet Union. I'm not sure Russia ever had the mass protests spread from Vladivostok, from Russian Far East to the European borders of Russia. That's to the west. The numbers were not, overwhelming. So maybe in total you had a couple of 100,000 people in one of the weekends, but they were nearly 100 cities. So just even small groups of people made it to the streets, and many of them were young. So about 70%, actually probably a bit more than 70% of protesters, they were age of 35 or younger. And that's a new generation. That's people who were born either at the very last years of the Soviet Union or already in Russia.
And many of them had never experienced anything but Putin's rule in their
exactly.
adult lifetime.
But also they never had an experience of Soviet school. So that's a Soviet education. Yeah, but these people, as young people around the world, they looked at Putin regime and they expected something, for them, and some, the glimpse of hope for the future, and they found none. And that's why this Navalny's effect had it's already had few waves, but it will have more. And it's it's even if they do something with Navalny, and God forbid, that's nothing goes wrong. But and I have just one hope that it's this. They will probably not use the any lethal methods to eliminate him, because I guess they understand it's no longer just Navalny. It's bigger than Navalny. The story is already beyond Navalny's personality. Yes, he is still, seen as the focal point of the protest, a gravity point. But even without him, that's the factors that brought so many people to the streets. They're still there. Russia has one of the biggest gaps in the world, and I'm not talking about America and Europe. It's in Africa included, between rich and poor. And this gap keeps growing, and now people can see it. People saw Navalny's movie. That's 110 million views. I mean, that's just an insane number. But even without the movie, they knew how corrupt Putin regime was. Now, it's it will add to their frustration, and we have this growing opposition to the regime. It's probably opposition is a wrong term, because it sounds political. It's more like rejection of the regime. Something similar we saw in Belarus, across the border from Russia. Total rejection of Alexander Lukashenko, Belarusian dictator. He decided to have these fake elections, and he put all his opponents in jail. But the wife of one of the incarcerated candidates won the elections, and it's by any standard, she was way above 50%. Some people said more than even 70%. And so Lukashenko, of course, used force. He refused to have any conversation about peacefully leaving office. And the reason he survived, that's what you said. It's not just Putin in Russia. It's Putin's effect outside of Russia. Lukashenko survived because he had Russian money to back his ruined economy. But even more important, he had Russian support, political and, I would say psychological support. We don't know how many Russian officers, from the police officers, were sent to Belarus. But what is even more important, it's just that this number, but the fact is that Putin is like 800-pound gorilla sitting in the bushes, and the Belarusian army that could interfere. That's what happened in many countries when the army saw a dictator using force against women and children and just going after unarmed protesters. And with the numbers, it's 75% or so against Lukashenko by any polling. Army often interferes, but having Putin just behind Lukashenko and having a Russian army doing regular exercise with Belarusian army, that's paralyzed any potential discord about around Belarusian officer corps, and let's save Lukashenko. And we can look at other countries. I've no doubt that the Erdogan's shift from feeble democracy to authoritarianism, that was a result of Putin's success. So you could look at Orban. There are many places on this planet where would-be dictators looked at Putin and said, why not? So it did work for Putin. Yeah, America is no longer a factor as it used to be. So why don't we try the same? And it's this factor doesn't go away on its own. Unless Putin is stopped, he will never stop. And we see that his influence is being felt even in the oldest democracies on the planet. The Russian traces of Russian intelligence were discovered behind the Brexit referendum in the UK. Russia openly supports many far-right groups in Europe and far-left as well, but far-right are more potent politically in Europe, especially in France. And this is the election is just next year, and Marine Le Pen can count on Putin's unceasing support for her ambitious run. And again, beyond the European continent, we see that many countries where the balance was just about to shift, like in Venezuela.
Yeah.
How Maduro could survive? Simple reason: because Putin was behind him. Without Russian support and without Russia's being a factor, I think that even Trump administration could have helped opposition removing Maduro, but not while Putin was behind Venezuelan dictator. And,
I think the importance of, I want to come back to that even because I think the centrality of Putin almost to the rise of the authoritarian movements around the world is something people don't quite focus on. Everyone's now alarmed about China, as they should be, and that's got its own issues and problems. But probably in the real world of other authoritarian states, Putin has actually had, perhaps in the short, medium term at least, more effect. But I want to ask you one thing before we get back to that, and then what the U.S. should do and so forth. I'm struck your comments about the movie, which was really focused on Putin's corruption, on his wealth, on that $1 billion palace he has. Why is it is it the case, and if so, why, that corruption seems to be maybe one of the most potent arguments against these regimes, as opposed to, in a way, more freedom of speech or democracy? I mean, those are all related, of course, but am I wrong, or it seems like that's really hit such a nerve in a way that maybe the more general appeals to liberal principles don't quite?
Look, it's the easiest demonstration of a regime being self-indulged.
Out for itself.
They don't.
Yeah.
Exactly. This is as though they don't care about people. And everybody knows the oil prices, the gas prices. They know that Russia had hundreds of billions of dollars of cash reserves, and what happens with this money? Nothing. So they keep cutting expenses on social security, on healthcare, on housing, on education, and especially now at the time of the pandemics, the Russian medical infrastructure, the healthcare infrastructure, was not up to the challenges. But at the same time, there's more and more money being thrown. It's not thrown away, because all this money eventually ends up in the hands of Putin's buddies and those who close to Putin, or close to Putin's relatives. So it's a mafia structure, and the control of money is like control of blood vessels. So the whole system, the system of Russian state now is under their full control. I used to say that every country has its own mafia, but in Russia, mafia has its own country. And people understand it, and Navalny chose this angle to raise the awareness about the the detrimental nature of Putin's regime for the future of the country. It's a part of the campaign to restore democracy in Russia, because it's then you can make a next step, just demonstrating that corruption is a result of dictatorship. If you have the normal parliamentary system and the checks and balances, then you can curb this corruption. You can basically fight it back, and corruption doesn't disappear altogether, but it will be under all the money resources and the expenditure of the state will be under control of independent inspectors and parliament, and you will have the different sources of power and control that will prevent the same corruption of endemic corruption of destroying Russian state.
Yeah, so it becomes kind of the symbol or the emblem of this kind of mafia dictatorship. It is interesting. I mean, I guess people of my generation are so used to thinking about the Soviet Union and the ideological challenges to liberal democracy. We probably underestimate the pure mafia challenges to liberal democracy. I mean, there's no ideology. Is there much of an ideology with Putin, or is it just, well, not just? I mean, that's already a mistake for me to say just. Is it the mafia alternative?
Yeah, you made a very good point. Speaking about the old generation, because I grew up in the Soviet Union, and I knew about this split, and about America, an American bloc versus Soviet Union, Soviet bloc, two systems. But as I already said, it's like game of chess, black and white. So we knew that the Soviet system didn't work, and even in America, while some people maybe had some sympathy for the Soviet Union, but very, very few had doubts about the democratic system, liberal democracy, the institutions of democracy, and the free market being far superior to the central planning, the socialism, and authoritarianism or totalitarianism of the unfree world. Putin's approach is different. Putin is not bound by ideology. He doesn't have to sell you something that can be easily refuted, or at least can be questioned. It's not about socialism. It's not about communism. It's about, as you said, mafia. Who cares? It's spreading doubts. It's much easier, and it's they can always shrug. We are bad. We are corrupt. Everybody is corrupt. Look here. Look there. Look at, and it worked. It keeps it keeps bringing results. So you look around now. They know how to turn these platforms like Facebook and Twitter that were built to promote freedom and individual opinions into a mechanism to attack those who are challenging authoritarianism. And it seems that the free world it's still searching for an antidote. And right now, I think we are losing this battle. Maybe losing is the statement is too strong, but we're definitely not winning this battle. Because we keep talking about Putin, but we should not forget about China. It's a much more potent country with more, technology and much more powerful economics, and just also, hiding in Putin's shadow, which is very smart, because China definitely has a long-term ambitions. And right now, Putin is doing a good job for China, because it's kind of a spearhead of the war of undemocratic world against America and American allies. But China could quietly stay behind and just do its bidding in Asia, in Europe, in Africa, elsewhere, gradually pushing America aside.
And I guess the mafia regime works by a combination of intimidation above all, but also bribery and payoffs and incorporating some people into it so that they feel that they can do well in this regime. It is in a way, as you say, in a way, the strength, maybe it's a weakness too, but the strength of it is you don't have to believe in anything that's falsifiable. You just have to put aside any sense of the public good or of individual conscience and just go along. But we know in history, of course, that that's very, very often successful, not just on the national level, but of course localities and being run by this kind of bosses and gangs and payoffs and so forth can last a long time.
But yes, you're right. But it's not just about mafia being ideologically neutral. They don't care. But it's just it's the this
well they care. They are threatened by reformers or by people.
They care about power. But
yeah.
but that helps Putin to look around and just to use every tool that is available. The Soviet regime had to stick to the left or far left groups in the free world. They had to develop all sorts of concepts like it's the peace movement or just disarmament, but all these concepts that could rally support. But they were always limited to the amount of options because of their political of strong political affiliation with the left. Putin doesn't care, so it's he's even more successful with the far right. But if he can just combine the far right and far left, he's quite happy, because he looks at every group as his I would say fifth column, doing what he had in mind to undermine the democracy as a system. And it's not just domestically, it's not just supporting the far right or far left groups, it's not just interfering in the elections in America or in the UK or in Germany or elsewhere, but it's also to demonstrate that the international order that was built after the end of the World War II, something that that took us decades to build. Everything that that worked on compromises and European Union works on consensus, but at least you have compromises, and that there are certain rules that nobody wanted to challenge because everybody thought it could help for just to preserve peace and cooperation. Yeah, there were conflicts, but there were conflicts outside of the area where everything was settled. Putin's attack on Ukraine, in annexation of Crimea, and de facto now also annexation of eastern Ukraine, that is being under direct Russian control, it was just a clear challenge to the free world that we signed the treaty, we signed all sorts of documents, we're part of one organization or another, we don't care. And you hear the messages. Basically, Lavrov said, "You don't like us, we walk away." So basically, they show middle finger. And what do they hear from the other side? Nothing.
So you think that was a key moment, the 2014? I mean, that was a key moment of testing.
But it's a key moment because Putin already recognized he could do it without being punished. But this is every year. Every year of Putin staying in power was step towards annexation of Crimea. 6 years before that, Republic of Georgia, he attacked Georgia. The reaction of the European Union? None. They tried to split the guilt. Maybe Saakashvili did something wrong, and they didn't want to take sides. America, again, not much. We know that Obama's campaign, because that was happening during the presidential campaign, was indecisive, and they didn't want to push too hard. Eventually they came up with a strong statement, but again, just statements. And what's happened when Obama took over from Bush 43? They immediately started a new era of relations with Russia. They were desperately looking for this reset button. So the outcome, we know the outcome. So it's not just Ukraine, because between Republic of Georgia and Ukraine we had Syria, and I think the failure to meet the red line drawn by Obama himself on Syria in 2013, that was a clear signal to Putin: I can do whatever I want, and no one will lift a finger, because they will always talk about the dialogue, they'll talk about interest, geopolitics, and the fact is that he covered Assad's back in 2013, and eventually recognized that he could interfere in Syria. That he did. That was also a big shift from one trend that we saw in the Arab Spring just to the opposite, because Assad succeeded in eliminating all call it reasonable opposition, and it ended up with Assad and Islamic radicals, and that's a classical dilemma. You don't like us, but look who is opposing us, and that's happened because America tried to stay away and just not to be too engaged. That's the whole idea. That is, if America walks away, if America is leading from behind, that would have a positive effect. We saw the outcome. America walked away, and the result was just Putin spreading his influence. And as I said, Erdogan also looked around and decided that why not? So why not? Just grabbing a piece here or there. Because it worked for Putin, it would work for me. America is no longer there. So, and we know what happens when policeman is not on the beat.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because I think there's a similarity between his foreign policy strategy, if you want to call it that, and his domestic strategy or his broader strategy. The broader strategy, I guess you could characterize as undermining any faith in democracy, making everything just self-interest and corruption, and that's how everything works. And come on, let's be realistic. And so you don't attack. As you say, it's not like communism with an alternative ideology to liberal democracy. It's just undermining faith and muddying the waters, and so it all becomes kind of cynicism and opportunism. And then in foreign policy, sort of similar, people like me who think back, I wasn't alive, of course, in the 30s, but, you keep expecting the moment of, the invasion of the Low Countries and of France and so forth. But it's not like that. It's much more of a salami tactic, kind of testing, probing, encouraging others, learning lessons each step, demoralizing the West. So both, I think, internally and externally, it's a kind of demoralization more than a confrontation in a way, but it seems to be very, unfortunately, it can be very effective.
It was effective. It is effective. As you call salami tactics, it works. He does something. He looks around, and then he makes the next step. Dictators never ask why, so they always ask why not. Putin hasn't attacked the Baltic states, because it's NATO. But he keeps doing things, to undermine NATO and European Union, and he hasn't succeeded, in full. But we know that today, European Union, and NATO, they are much weaker than they used to be. And it's not just about military component. It's about psychology. Yes, we have a very strong historical resentment to Russian aggression by Baltic states or Poland as NATO members, and of course Ukraine. That's another country in that region. But you go west from Poland, and you find that even Germany is just looking at Russia. We still have business to do. And the moment they put in here is, we have human rights, we have other important things, but business separate. That means business first. As long as you separate business with other things, Putin knows you will do business. And also, when we're talking about sanctions now, people say, the sanctions didn't work. Yeah, there are sanctions and there are sanctions. So yes, the sanctions that are not working now, those are not sanctions that are aimed to punish Putin and harm his regime. So those are the sanctions, more like lip service to public opinion. We're just doing something. So recently, when the sanctions were announced both in Europe and in America, it was like punishing puppets, but not the puppet master. And it is not enough, because the only thing Putin respects is a threat to his grip on power. And that means convincing his supporters, his henchmen, his cronies, that he is toxic, that he is unacceptable. Is he now? There was a moment, very brief moment in 2014 after annexation of Crimea. They tried to play some kind of a game to isolate Putin. It didn't last. It just didn't last now. And you hear now in Germany, the big wigs, the German government, they keep insisting. yeah, Navalny story, terrible. Putin's crackdown on protests, terrible. Putin's action, but the Nord Stream 2 must be completed. For Putin, it's just clear message. There's some white noise, and there is a green cash, and we know that's what is most important for Putin.
And the sanctions have to be effective, targeted at him and his cronies and at the heart
Absolutely.
of the regime.
And they know everything. Yeah, but that's the problem of any administration, even this administration that is doing a good job so far. But look at the sanctions against Saudis for Khashoggi's killing. It's not against MBS. It's against those who were, again, his puppets, those who followed his orders, and I think that is just this administration needs more time to prove itself, because they had a good start, and I'm just I'm glad that Biden made strong and rapid moves to support Ukraine. And when Biden called Zelensky, it was not hunting for dirt on his rivals' kids, but it's what's also important. It's that Biden addressed Putin. I mean, his speech in Munich was good, but especially because he talked about Putin. He removed this Russia's component. It's not Russia, it's Putin and Putin's dictatorship. And it's a very important message from the man in the Oval Office to dictator in Kremlin. So that was good. But again, then we saw maneuvers. And then, we see the State Department is trying to not even downplay it, but it's just, they have to bring Europeans aboard, and they're not sure whether they have to push Europeans or they convince Europeans, but it seems that there's no strategy that is fixed. And a couple of days ago, Antony Blinken called Lukashenko the last dictator in Europe. Last dictator in Europe? I mean, come on. We know who is the last dictator in Europe. We know who is the dictator in Europe. We know who is at the center of the web that supports authoritarianism and dictatorships and thugs and terrorists around the world.
Yeah, that's well said. Let's say a word about technology, because you've written about that so interestingly, and you mentioned it just in passing a few minutes ago, but the way in which technology, which one hoped would liberate and empower individuals and weaken authoritarian governments, now much more complicated.
Yeah, it's obviously it's a long story, and I think it's one of the key challenges, and somehow it's connected to what we discuss now, because technology is most important element of our social life, of our politics, of our just routine, especially during the pandemics.
Right.
So
here we are.
Most of our shopping now is also through technology. So
right.
Yeah, and I think it's just we should understand that there is the growing gap between our ability to connect with the world through technology and the politics, the way politics has been working, and it's still working in its old, almost antiquated form. Tech keeps accelerating, and our society adapts to it. We use it in many powerful ways. So communication especially has been revolutionized several times in our lifetimes. Internet, cell phones, smartphones. Then came social networks, and then social media. And that's an important, definition. Social networks, social media, not the same things, by the way. Yes, this was a game changer, because the social network as a concept was to promote this new opportunities for individuals who were in a driving seat. Social media will become targets for corporations that control this mechanism and these algorithms. Now it's not everything in the world to you, but you to everyone in the world. It's turned everyone into a publisher. It's no longer we depend on the source of information. We can actually also communicate. It's two-way street. But there are many other side effects that we yet to contemplate. And also there is the data collection aspect of it, and it's also as new and impactful. And of course, this all had a big effect on the political environment. And we're still figuring out, how this environment was affected, and it's still changing all the time. It's just, it's like shifting ground. So the problem is that what has not changed in response is our political system. People today used to immediate interaction and response. So social media, 24/7. The news cycle has compressed from weeks to days to hours to minutes to seconds even. So that's just, you look at Twitter. Oh, I got 100 likes, in 50 seconds. And it's and at the same time, our political process still measured in years. So and naturally, people are frustrated because it's no surprise, and then that's people expecting political system be responsive to what they feel, and if they are frustrated, they take to the streets. They spend more time online, and where attention is hijacked by the most extreme positions. We also know that it's psychological. Most extreme views, they always have greatest attention because it's something sensational. So that's why fake news, I think it's 70-30% split. Fake news always attract people, more because, I never heard about. No, maybe it's so interesting. And now with just, with growing partisanship, social media is just, it's feeding it. So you have more extreme views there, and political life is just kind of frozen and or very, very slow. And result, so it's the now, especially because pandemics, so many trends accelerated and exacerbated by the pandemics. So people want action. They want change. They, and it makes them an easy target for demagogues and radicals who promise everything, promise sky, stars, moon, whatever. So and even if they promise garbage, instinctively people want to believe it because it comes just on the regular basis, just from the phones, from every device that you have your hands on. And so on one side we have Moore's law, doubling our computing speed every few years, and now we need something like it for our political process. But political process is always governed by the Parkinson law. So instead of becoming, just responsive to this demand of the public and getting faster and faster, we see that the bureaucracy creates new layers. So that's they're trying to control the process by building new institutions, new committees, new entities that have to communicate and just find the compromises. And result, it slows it down because that's a natural response of bureaucracy. And on one side, you have demand for fast action, faster. On other side, slower and slower. So it creates an explosive ground for conflict. Because it's the political system. It has to keep up with the speed of the rest of the society, or as we see, it keeps becoming less and less relevant, and the country, not America but Europe, is more divided because people look for answers. They look for comfort, for refuge online, and what they find there radical views. So that help to enrage them and actually to feed their range with all these stories. So politics and the result, people are forming their own tribes, factions, outside of the system. And then what these factions do, they attack the system. And we're now seeing it in America that two-party system now became a hostage of this phenomena. One party has been eaten alive by this phenomena, by this call it virus. So it's GOP. Another one is still resisting, but I don't think it will last for long. So we could see the growing power of the far left that is just forcing even Biden administration to make concessions. Though Biden is still holding the ground. So unlike GOP, Democrats still have a potent, I wouldn't say majority, but it's the leadership that is holding taking a last stand. But considering the average age of the progressives and the leadership of the party, I have very little confidence that it will survive. And politics is about compromise for the greater good when it works. But if politics is just an obstacle for people, there is no need for compromise. So they just they don't. So and it's the compromise is seen as a weakness. And that's what happened with GOP, and we see the same now happening among Democrats. So any attempt to negotiate, so it's a weakness, and I'm as angry and disappointed as you are about GOP, but still, when I hear some Democrats denouncing Mitch McConnell, it reminds me that it's same people. They feel that they have no choice but to negotiate with Putin and Iran. So it's quite amazing. So no, we should talk to terrorists, to dictators, but not to to our citizens that happen to be a different view. Maybe they're just they're stubborn, they're reluctant to compromise. But that's the way politics works. I'm thinking, just what can be done, because it's not just an American phenomenon. I had an article in The Economist when I tried to come up with some creative solutions, it's very important that we do something now, because it's just pretending that we can fix the system and just go back to old normal. It's not going to work. So one of the ideas that I've been playing with, it's called advisory voting. It's like bringing the town hall into the digital era and public. Just in general, so it's just not keep it private, and it's an attempt to make it's like a polling in a way. It's not official, but to make sure that the public could use it, not for private gain. It's just as the private sector does, but it will help people to build cross-party coalitions based on issues instead of party lines. Because there's so many issues where just people can agree, but the moment you offer the party platform, they say, no, that's not for me. So how to create these new temporary coalitions? Because again, it's all about speed. So this is an issue. I can get together, so we can organize our group and just work on this issue. I mean, that's what's happening in New York now. I'm sure many people both sides could agree and to make sure that the future of this great city will not be decided by the democratic base, by the activists that will be selecting a new mayor. And it's hard to imagine that new mayor could be running on the left of de Blasio.
Yeah. So I think that's interesting. So you think electoral reforms, voting reforms, all kinds of. But what about the tech stuff itself? Shouldn't that be? There's got to be ways to reform that too. We can't just be passive victims of social media and of the technology without having a big government necessarily run it. Of course, run things. But have you given that much thought? Or of course, a lot about this.
Yes, I've been thinking about it a lot. So, but I don't see an easy solution here, because it's the tech is not big oil. So it's 110 years ago, American government could go after Standard Oil and just and trusts as a concept, and just have antitrust laws and to split the monopolies. How are you going to split Facebook? Yeah. Again, it's just it doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
No, it wouldn't help much if there were 5 Facebooks. They would still have the same algorithms.
Absolutely. So it's more about just creating opportunity for public to respond immediately to the matters that are important to them. It's about creating coalitions based on items, not party platforms.
Disaggregating somehow.
There's no easy solution. Yeah. But I think it's just many Americans would be happy to just to find a way of cooperating and sending the signal. Because very often, what we see now in the House or in the Senate, it's the polls, and just they show that Trump still has a lot of support. No, we cannot vote for impeachment. Or Democrats, we have to go for $15 minimum wage. It's not going to work, but we need to do it because party base. Now, if there was a chance for people, just in the country, just to push the button and just to express their views, directly. So I think that many of the things could be corrected. We could avoid extremes, because I think Americans and also Europeans and people who live in democratic countries, they don't have an appetite for extremes, for aggressive approach. But it's some kind of it's a modern phenomenon of Spanish Civil War. You have fascists and communists, and no one in it's a no man land in the middle, and then you have to make a choice, and that's what's happening now, and that's what we have to find new creative ways to avoid.
Yeah, I mean, the polarization and hyperpartisanship really, much more than I used to think, do huge damage. So the Democrats passed this HR1, which is the huge democracy reform, election reform, ethics reform bill in the House. And a lot of it's unacceptable to Republicans, and it passed on a pure party vote. There are things in it that are good, that would save voting rights, and against a Republican attack at the state level on I think, letting people vote. There are things in it that are bad. There are things in it that are just probably unnecessary or in any way not urgent. But the system is not set up to allow. And I think it would more in the old days say, well, we can't do all of that, but let's do these three things that are kind of important. We can get some bipartisanship on those. Let's have a discussion. Let's both in the public and in Congress. But somehow the whole system has become so adverse to that. I mean, I'm not sure what reforms. I mean, some of the voting reforms would help, I think, and some of the political process reforms. But I don't know. It's worrisome, though. I agree.
But it's the long-standing effect. Could be generated only by the bills that have bipartisan support. So it's just if you do anything on party basis, on a partisan basis, it's especially if executive action is involved, executive order by the president. It's just like an open invitation for the opposition to undo it the moment they have the majority. I've been saying it in 2017, the first year of Trump in the office, where many Democrats, blasting him for using executive actions, and McConnell is bending the rules of the Senate just to push the agenda. And I said I was dead against it, but I just wanted to challenge those Trump's critics, saying, "Are you sure you're against the principle or against Trump using it?" And now, unfortunately, we could see many of them now is pushing Biden to take executive action, to do this and that. And thanks God, Biden is trying to be modest in his actions. Though we could see that, for instance, it's the Keystone pipeline. That's those are the sacrifices that he had to make to pacify the most aggressive wing, the far left groups in the Democratic Party.
Final, let you go, but what to look for in the next weeks, months, year or two in terms of Putin, in terms of Russia, in terms of authoritarianism, inflection points, key moments, key elections even, or is it just unpredictable?
Look, you said Putin and elections.
I meant elections outside Russia. Are there moments of choice where sort of you think, I don't know, something happens? Or
look, let's see what happens.
Do you think a pushback, a reversal of authoritarianism might be most likely in now? I mean, we've had Venezuela, we've had Belarus, and we've had disappointment. I mean, Hong Kong, wonderful demonstrations of the public's willingness to take huge risks and pay a huge price for liberty and for democracy. And then you look at it and you think, well, we didn't do much, and now they're being repressed. And I don't know. I mean, what's your general sense of where we go?
Again, didn't do much is probably an understatement. So speaking about this administration, I think the most important thing for Biden and his supporters, it's not to settle for better than Trump, because that's an easy one. That's a very low common denominator. And unfortunately, many things Biden can do, they will be much better than Trump. So somehow, Trump helps Biden to lower expectations, and I hope that Biden action will remain strong, especially vis-a-vis Putin. I think that it's psychologically he understands that Putin is his best chance for posterity. There's not much he can do about American domestic problems. Whatever he does, it's most of the laws now. It's 50-50 in the Senate with Kamala Harris. It's the breaking the tie. China is just a long-term problem that will remain, on the top of the agenda many years after Biden's at the end of Biden's term in the office. But Putin is a challenge that he can handle. The Russian dictatorship is still very strong, but it's not as steady and rock solid as it used to be. And I think that's what we should watch is Ukraine. Ukraine is a front line of the battle between Putinism and what Putin represents, and physically Putin's regime and the free world. And it's not just Biden's calls to Zelensky, but it's also a full support by the State Department and Pentagon, publicly already expressed in the first months of Biden's presidency, and also the Zelensky's actions of closing 3 pro-Russian TV channels in Ukraine, closing them, just propaganda channel, and this is a political will that I wish Europeans will find to go after Russia Today and Sputnik. Those are the propaganda channels, and you can easily bring materials of Nuremberg Tribunal about propaganda outlets that promoted hatred, aggressive wars, and abuse of power. So Zelensky did it. So he went up these channels. He also sanctioned Putin's key man in Ukraine, Medvedchuk. Not just Medvedchuk, but his family assets. So that's again something that the Europe or even America are not willing yet to do, because they are afraid of legal actions. Zelensky, I'm sure, with the full support of Americans, he moved on this territory. And by the way, so far Putin did nothing. It just tells you that it's about actions. And I think Ukraine it might be a turning point. And also we'll see what happens in Belarus. It's still cold, but spring, summer, we'll see if the protest comes back to the streets. Tough, because Lukashenko just doesn't care about any reputation. Just they will go after people. They'll arrest them, they beat them, and God forbid kill them. Definitely they cut all financial channels that could bring money into the country to help the opposition. But it's just it's quite explosive, and it's the Belarus and Russia. They're like two vessels, connected vessels, and we all look at Belarus, and the Belarusians look at Russia, and I think we also have to see what happens in Russia with I think renewed demonstrations this coming spring and summer. I don't see that there's a potential to overthrow Putin regime, especially now with oil prices going up and Putin keeps collecting money. That's one of the downsides of these Green New Deals, that it helps dictators to fill their coffers with tons of cash that eventually is being used to prop up these dictatorships and also buy favors from democracies. I'm remain cautiously optimistic. That is just it's the pandemics pushed us into the unknown territory. And what's happened is that the free world demonstrated that even with these unexpected challenges, and it's nobody could predict, the free enterprise shows its upper hand. Because at the end of the day, it's America that came up with all the vaccines. Yes, we have Russian vaccine that, by the way, even Putin refrains from taking. We have Chinese vaccine that, it's not the most popular in the world. We had the European one, AstraZeneca, that's being rejected by many European countries now. So at the end of the day, United States, with all the criticism, is just, it's still leading the world. So it offers me hope that people will recognize that democracy and market economy are the two most important components of the success of humanity, the future success of humanity. And hopefully we'll find the right words, right channels to communicate this message to young people in America or in Europe, those who don't understand that the comfortable life they have and the greatest accomplishments of technology and the medicine, it's not a result of someone executive's order, but it's a result of these fundamentals that made America great in the past, and I believe will secure American leadership if we can preserve it.
That's a great note to end on, and not just hopeful, but very perceptive. And I we'll have to reconvene in 6 months or a year and see what's happened in Russia and around Russia, and then here too. But I think also your point about the domestic reforms we need to attend to this new world. We can't just hope for going back to some old normal. That's a very important point that we should continue to discuss in many different fora, and ultimately have another conversation about that too, because we need to rise to the occasion once again, I think. Anyway, Garry Kasparov, thank you so much for joining me again on Conversations, and thank you for joining us.